Welcome, everyone. This is our fourth webinar in our first spring webinar series. And you can see our two speakers' bios in the screen. We're going to do some quick announcements, and then we will launch right in. What is the National Extension Climate Initiative, or NECI? We serve as an anchor for extension professionals, researchers, and partners to collaborate on climate-related issues, share resources, discuss barriers and opportunities for advancing climate change programming in extension, and engage in professional development activities. We are 100% voluntary, and so we're encouraging you all to join one of our working groups. This program is being presented by the Curriculum Development Group, but we also have a Communications Working Group, a Justice, Equity, Inclusion, and Diversity Group, Professional Development Group, Partnership and Policy Group, and an Evaluation Working Group. You can find more on nationalextensionclimateinitiative.net. This is, as I said, the fourth webinar, May 22nd, Communities and Climates on Co-Created Materials. And on June 26th, we will have an event on aging and climate. You can see the recordings from past events at the website on the screen, and I'll put it in the chat later. And you can also register for the upcoming webinar, Aging and Climate. We have not built out our fall webinar series, but we hope to do so soon, and we will let you all know about that when that becomes final. We aspire to be a resource of many resources from which you can draw upon in order to apply for your own regional work. If you're inspired, we encourage you to join us, and you can learn more at the NECI website. Just so you see what is happening on the next webinar, these are our three speakers. Carl Pilmer, Danielle Aragoni, and Leslie Wharton are going to talk in three different valences, so to speak, on the topic of aging and climate. It's a really neat group that's coming up, and I encourage you all to join. Okay, with that, I'm going to pass it off. It's 3:03, look at that. Patricia is going to go first, and then Melissa is going to follow. So take it away, Patricia.
So today I'm going to talk about a grant-funded program that both Melissa Cray and I work on, and we affectionately call it C3PO, which is Climate Change Community Programs and Opportunities, or there is a very long name right below that that our funder, National Science Foundation, gave us. And I am going to provide an overview of the project. Melissa Cray and myself, along with Rosalind McCann and Art Mash, are the PIs on this project. And then I'm going to give more detail specifically on the work that I have done in Washington State with the Latine and Hispanic communities. So this project came together in November of 2020. It was election season, and I had a lot of anxiety about who was going to win the election. Bit of deja vu here with this picture, and now that it's 2024, and once again we're entering election season. But on the night of the election, November 3rd, I sent out an email to Paula Chappelle and said, "Hey Paul, do you think anybody in NECI would want to do a grant with me on climate change education?" Paul said, sure. And Melissa was one of the people that responded. I didn't really know Melissa at the time, but she has been a great collaborator, and the project was funded in the summer of 2021. As I mentioned, it's an NSF grant. It's Advancing Informal STEM Learning. The category of grant that we have, pilot and feasibility studies, is not on their current list of opportunities that they are offering for their next deadline in 2025. But there's lots of things there, and I think it's a great fit for people working on climate change education and extension type work. We have been working with 4 different underrepresented communities. In Alaska, our colleague Art Nash works with tribal and indigenous youth. He presented in this webinar series earlier this spring. In Utah, our colleague Rosalind McCann has worked with indigenous communities in Southeast Utah. And then Melissa, who will be presenting after me, works with women forest owners. And then I work in Washington State with the Hispanic and Latine community. And going forward, I'm just going to refer to that as the Latine community. So when the project started, when we wrote the grant, we had this idea that we would be doing a very interactive creation of the work that we were doing, that we would spend a lot of time on the design of the educational program around climate change. We would be soliciting feedback from our advisory board, from different groups that represented the different communities we were working with. And then we would be testing the curriculum and the products that we were doing. And so these arrows represent that we were hoped to have very much a two-way flow of information between everyone that was working on the project. Today, I'm mainly going to focus on this testing portion of the project and how that has worked for the past 2 years in 2023 and 2024. When we started this project as a team, we came up with learning objectives that we thought that all 4 locations can follow. We were using a curriculum based out of University of California called Climate Stewards. And we were each modifying and co-creating that curriculum for our specific community in our state. And I had not reviewed this diagram in a while until this morning, and I looked through it. And what really stood out to me was the social, cultural values, perspectives, and practices of specific communities and how you respond to climate change, and how our work really needed to focus on that, and how we could not take a curriculum, make a few changes to make it state or region specific. In many cases, there were pretty substantial changes that we made for it to fit our communities that we are working with. In Washington State, what we started with was a very thorough needs assessment of our community. We did lots of focus groups and interviews with people in the Latine community. And I could do a whole webinar just on that portion of our work. But some of the advice that community members gave us was to adapt how the information was presented to make it specifically for them. They like things to be very active, interactive, and fun and tangible. They encourage us to do field trips and ecological outings to show the importance of caring for the environment. And then recognition and awards are very important to people in the Latine community, as well as gifts and prizes. And then, make sure that these events are fun and providing food and music. It's more of a party than just an educational event. So the curriculum co-creation that we did, we took input from all of the interviews, focus groups, and the needs assessment that we did. We worked with 4 community leaders, and then we had an education consultant on the project, as well as myself. And so we were taking the curriculum from University of California Climate Stewards, and not only were we integrating to make it Washington State specific, but we were brainstorming on how to make this informal learning and how to make it appealing to the Latine community. The course components we changed a bit from the organization that is in the UC Climate Stewards. We started very much with community building and trying to encourage a community and create a community within our course. Then we went to environmental systems and talked about that, as well as some general ideas about climate change. And then from that point, we went to more into Unit 3, which was focused on local mitigation and community resilience. We talked about that instead of using the term adaptation. And then we finished the course with how you talk about climate and climate communication. And then our participants in our course, they do a final project, which they can do as an individual, or they can work in groups in doing that. So this is a Saturday morning at WSU Everett. You can see that all our participants in the course, they're actively working on a Saturday morning. It's not everybody that's going to be dedicated enough to come to a course on Saturday morning, but we did this for 10 weeks. And I would say about 3/4 of our classes were in person, and then we had maybe 3 that were virtual classes. We had all of our classes were very family friendly. We provided childcare. When they got there in the morning, we had a Mexican pastry called pan dulce, so it's a sweet bread, fresh fruit, coffee, and tea to make it a very welcoming atmosphere for them. We did have it in a university building and facilities, and I think that was important to connect them to the fact that, all of them and their families are welcome at university spaces, and to encourage them for their family members to be part of the university and the different activities that we have there. Another thing I want to point out is that the University of California program is called Climate Stewards. That does not translate as well into Spanish. And so we use the term promotores del clima, which translates to climate ambassadors for this section of the program that I'm going to talk about. So I'll be using promotores del clima, or just promotores going forward. So one aspect of the course was to have people that were the lead instructors and the guest speakers in the course to be members of the Latine community, to be fully bilingual in English and Spanish. And so Cristina Ocana Gallegos, she's my friend and colleague here on the right. She's a fabulous lead instructor. She also helped with the co-creation of the curriculum. And so she has been involved for a very long time in creating this Promotores del Clima. And then we were able to find 6 different guest speakers to talk about different aspects of the work that they do on climate change. Maria is from California. She used to work for California Extension. She's now with a nonprofit in California. Isabel used to work at University of Washington. I have collaborated with Isabel for probably 6-7 years now, and she's a great colleague to collaborate with. And then she was able to introduce me to McGill from Earth Corps. Dr. Garcia Perez is a professor at WSU and a colleague of mine. And then Dr. Ernesto Alvarado is a professor at University of Washington. And then in reading the newspaper, a local newspaper, Christina learned about Dr. Jesus Perez Linares, who's a science teacher and does a bilingual course for his classrooms in Burlington. And so they were really critical to be able to find this diverse array of people to give their time to speak and answer the students' questions. I think it was very inspirational to them to see members of their community being professors and working for these organizations across the United States. And so we generally appreciated their contribution. So part of what we did in this course is that we tried to make it very interactive and to bring fun into the course. Within the Climate Stewards curriculum, there's several metaphors that are used that talk about climate change, and several of those translated well into Spanish. Early in the course, we talked about the effect of greenhouse gases in our atmosphere being a heat trapping blanket. Here on the left of your screen is my friend and colleague, Tatiana Geraldo, and she was involved in doing all of the interviews and focus groups and helping to create the curriculum. And so by showing the greenhouse effect and having each blanket represent a greenhouse gas, you start with one blanket and then you add another and another and another. And at this point, our volunteer for this process has 6 blankets on there and they're feeling a little warm. So it's a very visual representation of what is happening to the earth. The same thing we do to illustrate another one of the metaphors, which is regular carbon cycles versus a rampant carbon cycle. And so what we start is with these green tennis balls, and we show how the carbon cycle works when there are no fossil fuels in the equation, and how it changes going throughout the year, how it goes up in the summer and then down in the winter in the northern northern hemisphere, and then the opposite in the southern hemisphere. And then we take the cycle and we integrate gray tennis balls, which represent coal. We integrate black tennis balls, which represent petroleum, and what that does to the carbon cycle. And then we either have a box or a bucket or something, and that represents the Earth and the atmosphere of Earth. And once we integrate all these different tennis balls, at some point you can easily see that it is overflowing. And so a very visual representation of what is happening with the carbon cycle and how it's totally out of whack. And once you make it visual, it's easier to see and easier to understand. I did part of this activity in Spanish. I have now given myself a challenge that I'm going to learn to be able to lead this entire activity in Spanish by the next time I do it. So we'll see. We did a lot of team activities, and that was one thing our participants loved doing, was working in groups. This was an assignment early in the course where they had to do a concept map about community connections. On this side of the screen, this group was thinking more globally in terms of the community and the global community that we all live in. The picture on the right, that group is thinking more locally in terms of, what's the impact of all our urban communities and forests here in the Pacific Northwest. And one other thing was that in both classes that we've done, we're in the process of completing our second, is that we've had talented members of the community that are good artists. And so that is a way to integrate their skills and their information into the program. We did some of the courses we did virtual. And part of what we realized that we had to do in this class was that some of our participants were not familiar with technology. And so we had to spend time helping them learn technology. So we use Qualtrics for course registration, but we also use that as a way for them to provide us feedback after every class, and then also to submit their homework. The original Climate Steward's curriculum is designed to be on Canvas, and that just wasn't going to work for our community to use that much technology. We did have some Zoom meetings, and within that, they were able to learn about breakout rooms and how to use chat, how to use Jamboards. We also worked in Google Classroom. We didn't do that in the first year, but we've used that in the second year, and it's worked well. And then another online learning technique we've used is Pear Deck Learning Platform, which is an interactive way. The first year, it did not work quite as well. And what we realized is that we needed to walk through the program and the questions with our participants, and we got much better results and interaction by doing that, as opposed to just letting them do that themselves. We integrated field trips into the course. The first year we had 3, the second year we've had 2. This was from in spring 2023. And we went to the Northwest Streams Dinner, a very family-friendly place where we toured the restoration project that they had there, and learned a lot about the water cycle, learned a lot about forests and how forests are important to carbon storage and important to maintaining the water quality here in the Pacific Northwest. And then most recently, we went to a low tide beach exploration and did that on Saturday. I think it was May 11th. It was a beautiful day to be at the beach to observe the low tide. The one thing that happened during that event, and I don't think any of our participants are going to forget this, is quite a ways from shore, we came across this concrete structure that was kind of like a grid, and it had pools of water in it. And there were a lot of marine organisms in these pools of water, a lot of starfish, sea stars, a lot of cucumbers, a couple fish in there. It was just full of marine life. And if you can see in the distance, like way back here is a shoreline. So our leader on this field tour felt that it was going to be hours before high tide would reach this area. And she also thought that this was not natural, that these organisms were probably placed there by somebody. And so we ended up transporting them back to safe places closer to the actual water's edge and hope that some of them would survive. It was also quite a warm day. So it was also illustrating the stress of having higher temperatures and how global climate change is going to be affecting our marine life during low tide events when you have abnormally warm summer days, which we had during the heat dome in 2021. As part of the course, the promotors do a final project. In the Climate Stewards curriculum, it's called a capstone project, but final project is a terminology that is better for our group. Last year, they did a wide variety of projects. They worked individually, where they worked some in groups. This participant on here had a background in health. And so she did a booklet specifically on climate change and health. So salud is the word for health in Spanish. Another one did a video on fashion and climate change, and others specifically worked on recycling. They're very much interested in that. Another participant did specifically on women in science and the environment, and made kind of a little booklet on that was quite informative. And then we also had a participant that Todo por Tierra, Everything for the Earth. That was a small book that was for children on how to learn climate change that was beautifully illustrated, all in Spanish. So it's quite exciting to see their final projects. The current group that we have now, they are working on their final projects. At the end of the course, we ask all our participants why they were participating. And this is from 2023, their data, and we had 24 that responded to the survey, and the majority of them are wanting to learn about solutions, and they're wanting to learn more about climate science. So those are the two most popular answers. They were able to select all that they felt were relevant in the survey questions. The other top categories were to meet others that had similar interests, and then to learn more about community resilience. So this is our graduation class from 2023. We are here at WSU Everett. They have their certificates. You can see they're all pretty darn happy. Here's me. Here's my colleague, Christina. And the one thing that's easy for me to point out in this photo is this is very much a family-centered program. It was last year. It was this year. Let's see, we've got two people here. I hope you can see my arrow. Lorena and Luis, so they're a married couple. We have over here, we have another married couple, and then their children are also part of this program. That's their son, Hob. Over on the right, we've got another married couple, and then here's one of their sons, and I think their other son is over here on the right. Mother-daughter pairs, siblings, and it's just exciting that they bring the whole family to learn about climate change and that they are thinking about this as a family. Some of our speakers that I mentioned earlier this year, they brought their partners, brought their spouses with them when they came to present at the course. And so family is so important to this community, and designing the work that we do to make it very family friendly and appealing to all ages. Some of our promotors last year were selected to be interns over the summer. They went to a couple different fairs and carnivals, and they had a what we call a climate wheel. And people at the festival would spin that, and then they get a question about climate change, and they'd answer 3 questions. If they got them all right with some guidance with the person that was manning the booth, they get a small prize. Here on the bottom, these are like compost bins that we were giving out as part of this event. In the fall in 2023, we had a climate carnival. where we specifically had lots of different tables and booths with different types of activities for them to learn about climate change in a very interactive way. That part that we did in our class where we did the heat trapping blanket and showed the different blankets and how that mimics what's happening to the earth. That is one of the activities that we demonstrated during the climate carnival. So some of the feedback that we got from our promotores, I'll read these in Spanish and then I'll say briefly what they translate to. Muchas gracias por todo. El curso y la paciencia fue una de las mejores cosas que me ocurrió en el año pasado. So this is thank you for everything. This is one of the best experiences that's happened to me in the past year. Me gustó que nos dijeron la oportunidad de educarnos sobre este tema. Thank you for educating us about this topic. I mean, it's so appreciative that we were doing this for them, that we were making information available in Spanish. One thing I will hammer home on is that it is not enough just to translate information into another language. You have to directly engage with that community to help them learn, to help them, to work with them, to understand, be involved, and co-create the learning experience. Some people, reading is not their thing, and they're not going to read it. And I was at a conference last week, and someone who said to me, who's from the Latine community, you know, printing a bunch of translated materials is just a waste of paper. So you need to interact, you need to engage, and you need to make it hands-on. These are the impacts from our Promotores 2023 class. We had 23 Promotores da Clina graduates. 8 of them were selected to be interns in 2023. They had over direct conversations with over 300 community members. This is in Snohomish County. And we believe we really raised the awareness about climate change. And what we need to do is talk more about it. If you look over here on the right of the screen, you can see, that the majority of them, they shifted their opinion from before the course to after the course, and their thoughts about, you know, what we need to do about climate change and their feelings of empowerment. Lessons learned, you know, it takes time to build these relationships. I have been working on different educational programs with the Latina community for about 8 years now. And, you know, it's taken that much time to make it so that I am a respected member of the community that knows that I'm not going to just disappear when the funding's gone and only going to show up again when I have another project that I want them to do. You have to make things intergenerational so that it appeals to teens to grandparents is what I say. It has to be fun, engaging, and interactive. And one thing that I've noticed is talking about climate change, it can be extremely depressing. It can be very heavy. But with this group, it seems lighter. We're having these hard conversations, but there seems to be more optimism, more empowerment that we can actually do something about this problem. This is my team. This is Christina here in the middle. This is Leonor, who does childcare, and this is Melina. Melina's in Spain currently, learning to be bilingual in Spanish and English. And right now her mom's helping me. So just another idea of how the family sticks together. And then the extreme number of people that have helped with this project. I'm probably leaving somebody off this list, but we had over a dozen people on the C3PO team that we were meeting monthly. We had an advisory board. Some of the advisory board were people that responded to that email blast I sent out on election day in 2020. And then we each had different partners that worked with us. There's my contact information, and I'll leave it up to Jenny if there's time for maybe 1 or 2 questions.
So there is one question in the Q&A. If anybody has any other questions, please type them into the Q&A. I don't know if we can allow you to speak. But if you would respond to the question, do you see it, Patricia, or shall I read it?
Yes, I'll read it. I'm grateful for your sharing this exciting collaborative work. Did you specifically or generally define community through your process? wondering about the possibilities of directly empowering more than human elements within your program, e.g. person to person, equal person to nature connectivity pathways. Thanks again for such important, exciting work regarding family-driven work. Person to nature connectivity pathways. That is a very interesting question, Scott. Thank you for that. I don't know that we really did that. I mean, one hard part about this is the Spanish speaking community that I'm reaching to. They are extremely diverse in terms of their life experiences, how they ended up in the United States, the countries that they come from. I mean, all of that is just, it's a lot to handle. And I think this is a great idea for future work, and I appreciate your question. And I know one of the initial surveys that I'm getting about directly with this course is the marine field trip that we did just a few weeks ago. People really like that. And just people don't think about, you know, you can go to the beach during low tide and you can see all these cool, amazing things and learn about them. You know, they think about the beach as like sand and sun and fun and games. And, you know, it's just so many things that you can open the world to.
So Sharon, there's another great question from Sharon in the Q&A, but I really do want to move us on to Melissa. So Patricia, if you could respond
Yep.
in text, because it's a great question, Sharon. And we can maybe verbalize it at the end if there's time. But just Patricia, do you want to just respond? You had one question from Sharon, just so verbally everybody can hear it in case they can't see the chat.
That was a question about how you get started. Is that the right one, Jenny? Yes. So at one point at Washington State in Extension, we had a person, fabulous colleague of mine, friend who passed away too soon, and he was a Latino man, and that was his job, was to engage with the Latino community throughout Washington State and to do economic and community development. And he was based in our office, and so he was just a fabulous motivator to get this started. And, you know, even though he's no longer with us, you know, I see his work living in through me and all the people I'm reaching. And so just finding one person within the community that you can make a connection with. And, you know, it was through him that he offered advice and gave us introduction to this organization, Latine. And, you know, I go to their fundraisers, whenever they ask me to write a letter for a grant they're applying for, you know, I make time to do it. And I make them just a priority in the work that I'm doing, and I will for the rest of my career. And that's how you build and sustain those relationships. It takes time and investment.